Hi, folks. Thank you for coming to Back to Basics. My name is Girish Pally, the host for Back to Basics for Season 3. Today, we're going to speak with Joyce Gerber, and we're going to find out what Cannabis Mom is all about. Now, we do know what cannabis is, and if you don't know, please go to my episode on Season 1 to listen to what cannabis is all about and why is it good for you, why is it bad for you. That's up to you to decide. But this episode, what we're going to talk about is caregivers, stresses, migraines. I mean, those are things that what happens throughout the day. And it happens to ladies and happens to moms. And that's what we're going to be targeting today on this episode. So why don't we stop talking to me and let's connect with Joyce to talk to her about cannabis and why she created this whole empire of hers. So let's speak with Joyce. I'll see you there. Hi, folks. My name is Girish Pally, the host for Back to Basics. As I said earlier today on the intro, today we're going to speak with Joyce, and we're going to talk about cannabis. Now, is cannabis a good thing or a bad thing? Is it something great for you or bad for you? Is it a medicine or a cure? Or is it a addictive drug? That's something that you have to decide when we get into the topic today, as I said. But there's one thing that I'm really going to enjoy is that Joyce is an amazing person. Spoke with her last year, and here she is. She's going to be on case, Back to Basics season 3. So, Joyce, thank you again for coming to Back to Basics.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm usually the person who asks questions, so I do like to be a guest once in a while to remember how it feels.
Yeah, that is so true. That is so true. Joyce, thank you again for coming on my show and making this brighter for me. So thank you for that. But before we start about cannabis and the good thing and the bad thing and the disadvantages and the advantages, right? What does back to basic mean to you?
Well, thank you again for having me on. This is really lovely. When I talk about myself, I'm a mom, so simplicity and ease is really sort of my trying to create a life that is as frictionless as possible so I can get as much done as I need to. So, back to basics, keeping things simple.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for that. Now, as I said on my intro and you just heard that, is it as simple as that it's good for you or is it bad for you? I mean, let's start
Let's
right
start there.
or right start there.
All right. So I'm not quite sure how to start this, but what I do like to say is that cannabis is not a belief system. It is a science. So when people tell me they don't believe in cannabis, that's not really something I want to discuss. And that this is part of our system. We have within our system, all mammals have what is called an endocannabinoid system within us. Cannabinoids are those the the what we talk about, THC, CBD, CBG, those are cannabinoids. And our body literally has receptors for those cannabinoids. So that's kind of where you start, is that our body is built for this. Unlike alcohol, which people often like to compare cannabis to, alcohol is literally a poison.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And our body often, when we talk about sort of testing it and trying to figure if it's in your system, the thing about alcohol is your body does not want it. So it gets rid of it as quickly as possible.
Mm,
But cannabinoids from cannabis remain within your system because that is part of how it works with our body. So when you're testing it, it's a very difficult thing to test for to figure out if somebody's high or if these cannabinoids are working for reduction of inflammation, which is a really big one that we talk
mhm,
about.
Yeah, thank you again for explaining the right and the wrong and how people they think that it's the advantage or disadvantage. So I mean, whoever's listening right now on my podcast and the show here, thank you again for coming here. Uh, you know, you guys have to go and make that decision that what's right and for you. And I want your feedbacks when it comes to this episode, if you don't mind. Joyce, let me ask you this here. Now, I have been hearing many different things, and there's no right and wrong answer. It's just, evidence of what we see, right? And I'm going to be a devil advocate and I'm going to agree and disagree at the same time. So bear with me, whatever I'm going to say here. But some people, they say that when they take cannabis, you're going to run out of brain cells, just like when you're smoking something or when you're drinking alcohol, or when you're doing something really bad and addictive, right? The key word I'm saying is addictive. Isn't this kind of the same thing?
No.
Okay.
So, and again, if you want to just know my background, I mean, I come to this as a middle-aged white lady. I'm a lawyer by training. I grew up in the era where, my brain was fried on drugs. I was a pretty straight-laced person. I did not use cannabis and any I was not a stoner. That was not where I came from. And I really did believe all that. I believed that it was bad for your brain and it was going to make me stupid. I believed all that. And I did consume it a little bit with friends, but it was always very like secretive. And my own cannabis awakening came in 2016. I went out to Denver, Colorado with my husband, and we did a private tour of the new industry that was established out there.
Mm,
And it was on that tour I met a woman who gave me sort of the background because I didn't know any of the story, just like none of us know the story about what cannabis is,
mm,
why it is illegal, how it even came to be on the Controlled Substance Act, and how cannabis and hemp specifically, I talk about this, it's a plant. Cannabis is the one plant we've divided into hemp and marijuana basically, but
mm,
this plant has been part of human history 10,000, a million. I mean, it's been part of human history forever. We have 10,000 years of recorded history of it being part of our systems. And for 100 years,
mm,
100 years in human history, the hemp plant, the cannabis plant was taken out of what we had access to. It just we didn't have access to it because some very bad reasons. And that was sort of my cannabis awakening when I realized that what the plant is, why it is illegal, and what it can actually do for you. Everything I knew was literally wrong, like literally just wrong.
mm, mm,
So
mm,
I had to do my own sort of start thinking again about it because what I talk about a lot on the podcast is what you do also is stories. And these stories are very, very powerful. And the story that we've been told about what this plant is and what it does to us is propaganda.
mm,
And we need to reverse this because the truth is hemp, more important than the marijuana that we talk about, which is intoxicating. Hemp can do so many things for us and our planet, and it could reduce, we could actually go from many of the carbon industries that we exist to cannabis because hemp is so powerful in that way. So
mm.
we kind of have to look at it in a full context. Why is it illegal in the first place? And how did it even get to be part of the Controlled Substance Act, which is really where we are stuck now at the federal level?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that point up, because my next question is that why is it taking so long for the U.S. to be legal, right? So let's back up a little and find out as to why is illegal, and why is illegal today, and how, I should say.
So it is illegal now because it is considered it's on the Controlled Substance Act at a level that mean it has been put at a level that says it has no medicinal purpose, that it cannot be used. And that was basically came out of the Nixon administration because of whatever political issues he had. And that was sort of backed up by, if you go back to time, they have this, it's a report called the Schaefer Report. There's been lots and lots of studies on cannabis to figure out how to prove how dangerous it is, and you never can prove it. So
Mm,
there's a famous report called the Schaefer Report that said it isn't dangerous, and yet it still went on to the Controlled Substance Act. But if you want to go back to hemp, it really goes back to paper and oil, where they created this the Marijuana Tax Act, and then we have a famous character in human history, Harry Anslinger, who is part of drug enforcement. He had a big vendetta against black people, I think, and Hispanic people and hippie. I don't know. He just really didn't want this. So there was a lot of drug enforcement on this plant. So these are stories that we were told and backed up by our government
mm,
to believe that this is really a dangerous plant, which is not true. So now we're trying to unravel a lot of that. And that's why these powerful stories I tell of these women. And although I really don't believe cannabis cures everything. What I do believe and what I see every day are these women who have healed themselves or healed someone they love. And these powerful stories of healing, or these little micro stories that are kind of being passed around, are
mm,
what changing hearts and minds across, at a grassroots level. It's moving up policy wise, but our government has its own issues. So
mm. Yeah, no,
it's
no,
still
that's
remains illegal federally.
yeah. But before you go further on, and before I forget, also, um, you mentioned about the police officer thinking, about the black and the Hispanics situation, about the legal, illegal. Um, do you think that was a stereotype, that these race is equal to drugs, and that's why that thought process came in? Do you think?
I mean, I believe that cannabis has always been used by creatives
Right.
So we have part of the jazz era. You want Louis Armstrong. You want to talk
Right.
about sort of that part of like using cannabis in that way. And we all know the history of America, so that's a little bit dangerous. And
Right.
even the word that is created, marijuana, is a made up word to make it sound more like it came from Mexico or it has,
Right.
Hispanic origin. So these again, these are how stories are told and created, and then this is part of the story that was created in this country
Mm,
to demonize a plant. She's a plant. She's a
mm,
caregiving plant. That's what
mm.
she is.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you again for clearing all that stuff up. So let me ask you this: is that how the I'm going to say something funny now because that's just what the whole history is all about, right? So is that where the term hippie also came in by using all these drugs and smoking it?
I don't know. I don't know my hippie culture. I'm sorry. I grew up in the '80s, man. I was part of Reagan.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, no. Thank you so much for being a sport on this joke here. But thank you
Yeah.
again. So, so now that the stereotype is there about the legal and illegal, what is the next step? Why is it taking that long to make it legal?
I mean, again, this is something that's been it's integral to, like, what we believe. We have the DARE program. I can't even tell you how many of the women in who I've spoken to who are presidents of their DARE program because this is such an integral part of our education system. You know, if you bel again, these are stories. We are very susceptible to stories because they make sense of the world, and these are the stories we were told. And I still come back to this idea that the way we change hearts and minds is by seeing someone you love or someone you really care for, use this plant medicine after having so many other issues, which are mostly the stories I'm sharing. Most of these women have been very sick
Hmm,
or their children have been very sick, and they find cannabis literally as a last resort.
hmm,
And then once they find that they can use this medicine that has been so demonized that it actually helps them, they become evangelized. And
hmm,
that's the only way to explain why some of these women remain in this industry because it is so difficult because it is illegal at a federal level.
hmm,
So there are lots of things you can't do.
hmm.
And there are lots of like specialties. It's like the real world. It has everything the real world has, but upside down.
Mm. Yeah, thank you again for explaining that. Let me ask you this: when I met you on a different platform, and we talked about in detail about this whole thing, right?
Mhm.
Why why is it so mainly for the focus on female for you?
For me, that's my niche. Again, I'm a woman of a certain era. I grew up believing I could do anything the boys did. I went to, college. I went to law school. I tried to lean in like Sheryl Sandberg told me to, which I must say was the stupidest advice I'd ever received.
Okay.
I am the mother of two children. They're now in their 20s. I have raised them and they have left me. So I think I've done a good job. But I grew up believing that I was supposed to be able to do everything, and I couldn't. It was very difficult, and I always felt it was like a personal failure that I couldn't have a really high-powered career and keep my marriage together. I used to be a divorce attorney, and raise my kids, so I kind of fell out of that world. I fell out of the professional world, and I could see after feeling like a personal failure, like this is like a personal failing, that
Mm,
I am part of this generation of women, so many women like me. I went to law school, and more than half of my law school class were women.
mm,
One of my classmates, Maura Healey, is now the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts,
mm,
but half of my friends literally dropped out of the profession because we couldn't figure out how to do it all. So
mm,
that when I think about cannabis as a new industry being built in the image of a caregiver, because again, this plant is a caregiving plant. It's a female plant. She is healing.
mm,
This industry, my dream is that it be built in her image, and we have some different rules because the rules of business, for the most part, weren't created for me as a caregiver, and I often had to hide that I had kids or just I was always told I couldn't do my job at home, that was a big part of it
mm,
back before the pandemic. I had to go to it was just very difficult, so I just think we can do better. There's a
mm,
whole generation of women like me, we're exceptional. We've done so many things, but when we come to the world of business or when we're trying to have a profession, we were still making choices. And I keep hoping we can create an industry that doesn't make us make those choices and it values caregivers
mm. Wow,
who are,
thank you.
who are, who are often women. And again, I talk about caregiving. There are men who are caregivers too, but you know, oftentimes the caregiving is given to us because that's historically how they think it should be, but it isn't necessarily the case. It
No,
doesn't
no,
have
no.
to be that way. Yeah.
Well, I mean, in today's world, it's definitely very different. We are talking about back in the days when the stereotype is that the caregiver equals to ladies, and that's just how the nature is, right? I mean, that's back in the days, not today. Uh, but thank you again for explaining that. So, Joyce, let me ask you this: cannabis equals to mom equals to your podcast, and how did that come about, if you don't mind?
The perfect trifecta of desperation, isolation, and rejection.
Oh, if you break it down, if you don't mind, thank you.
Again, I was not a cannabis person. I have my 40th high school reunion is coming up. I am not the person anyone thought would become a Canna Mom. I just that isn't who I am. Um, I came into this industry in 2016, just as it was becoming 2016 in 2016 was the year of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We voted for retail adult use in Massachusetts. So I was coming into it just in the beginning. And originally I thought I was going to go into cannabis law. I could see that all the law firms or some of the law firms were literally setting up cannabis law divisions, which was kind of like mind blowing, really.
Mm,
And this is new, like this is new law, and it's so hard to learn. You're never going to be part of something new, and it's so hard to kind of like break into something that exists. So I had this vision that I could go into this new industry.
mm,
And as I learned more about what was going on, I ended up working for a media company. In 2018, I found a position as the executive producer at a media company who was doing cannabis podcasts. So that is
mm,
literally how I fell into podcasting. I did not know what a podcast was. I read the newspaper. I literally get the newspaper delivered at my house. I read a paper newspaper. Like I and I didn't really know that much about cannabis. So for about a year, I was the person learning about how you actually create a podcast, getting guests on, and also just seeing how big this industry was because I was bringing guests on.
mm,
And I could see it was everything from criminal justice. I had a friend who was running for district attorney, and she was willing to come on his podcast and talk about cannabis and
mm,
not a horrible way, which was sort of revolutionary,
mm,
to cosmetics and nurses and businesses. I could see how big this industry was. And then in 2019, I was in the studio with a friend of mine, and we were talking about how you talk to your kids in this new era.
mm,
My friend did not want to be part of the I know. Everyone was funny about cannabis, so she didn't wanna be part of, like, the cannabis talk. And the guys in the studio wanted to call it the Canna Mom Show. So I was like, "I'll do it. I'll be the Canna Mom on the Canna Mom Show," and we started at the studio, and I ended up leaving, the media company, and I was given they said I could take the podcast with me, so I've been on my own since 2019.
yeah, yeah. Congratulations on that, by the way. And you've been doing well. I've been watching you, and in a nice way, I'm stalking you.
Thank you. That's good. I want attention. It's all about attention. It's all about attention.
So thank you. Let me ask you this, and I'm gonna twist it up a little. Why does Canamom equal to stress woman only? Is that because that's the reason for having cannabis for moms when they're in stress level?
Not stress, I mean, health, it's wellness. Again, I grew up in the era of the wine mom. I could literally yell across my office, "I'm stopping at the package store to get some wine. Anyone want anything?" And people would have been like, "Of course she's getting wine before she picks the kids up." But I couldn't have smoked a joint, like and now I understand being a wine mom isn't so good, and cannabis actually helps you, decompress faster and be more focused on your children. People keep thinking they say to me like, "Oh, you'll be stoned, you'll be on the sofa," and that's not really how cannabis works.
Hmm.
It helps you sort of get rid of and I talked to my doctor about this years ago. He's like, "It helped get rid of all the other stuff, the peripheral stuff, and it lets you focus on the thing that's in front of you," which as a mom or a caregiver, that is literally your job. So
Hmm.
if you can I was not a fun mom. I wasn't the mom who could get on the ground and play because I was always stressed. I was always thinking about other things. But if I had been a Canon mom at the time, I could have actually let a lot of that stuff go, and I could have been more engaged in the moment, which is so important. So
Hmm.
that's why I think this works for a lot of moms in a better way than wine does.
Hmm.
So and again, I don't think it works for everyone in the same way, and it isn't necessarily for everyone either, but it has to stop being the thing people come to as a last resort. It just has to be another option on the table to help us be healthy because when caregivers are healthy and feel good, they can take care of others.
Hmm. Yeah, thank you so much. Let me ask you this before we go to the new section that we have a new for season 3, and I think you and I have actually kind of talked about it. But how do you start with cannabis if you have never done it before, if that makes sense. I mean,
Oh yeah,
do we go by brownies or do we go by the oil? There has to be a certain way to slowly transition into that, right? So
absolutely. So I've been on a mission here in Massachusetts to visit as many dispensaries as I can. I've been trying to go once a week, and to make it more fun, I'm taking my friends. So most of my friends do not. Mm, Most of them are just not cannabis people. We're wine friends.
yeah, yeah.
So, and some of my friends are older, so I bring them in and I help introduce them to these products. It depends sort of where you are in life. I don't necessarily believe that edibles are the best way to begin. That's not how I would start in some ways, because an edible is something that kicks in at a certain period. It also depends what you're trying to relieve. Like I have a really, most women are either they can't sleep or they have
Right,
anxiety.
right.
So there are a lot of good gummies, that might be it. Gummies, things if you're gonna take it at night to help you sleep or stay asleep, edible could work because it's like a longer release. If you want something that's more immediate and you don't wanna smoke, people have a big issue with smoking these days. A tincture is a really good way to help relieve you, and it's pretty immediate. Those are,
Mm,
the oils.
mm,
There's also vape cartridges if that's something, you like instead of smoking a joint, and then there's a lot of different ways to consume, and then there are just really good hand products like salves. Like, those are things I always used to give to my mother in her nursing home. I
mm,
would bring these little, their CBD salves I would give to people, and they put them on their hands, and their hands would feel better. And that
mm,
would be like, they'd try the next thing. They'd be like, "Okay, now what can I try?" So there's a lot of there's also just a lot of products out there now, which is why it's nice to have someone to come with you or to help you figure out what could work for you because it can be very overwhelming, which is, when my friends come with me, I think they appreciate me going through the menu with them and sort of explaining what the different products do and even like the philosophy because everything is now in state. You can't do interstate commerce. So
mm.
all these products that are in Massachusetts dispensaries are from Massachusetts, so you can actually know who the people are making them.
Yeah, thank you so much for explaining that. And there was a person that we interviewed back in season one, and his name is Darwin. We call him the Spock of cannabis, and he has a website called Spock of Cannabis, so you can check that out. It's
Okay.
really an awesome guy to chat with. He came on my show, and we totally talked about Spock. By the way,
Yeah,
obviously,
yeah,
I mean
yeah.
we had to. We had no choice. Thank you again, Joyce, for that. There's a new segment that we have started for season three, which is the rapid fire round for Back to Basics. Okay, there are certain words and sentences, whatever pops in your head, whatever thought process you are having at that period of time. You want to go and play that game whenever you're ready?
Sure.
Awesome, 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 awesome. Thank you so much. So the first word is science.
Real.
Okay. Body.
Person.
Okay. Alcohol.
Bad.
Cannabis.
Good.
Brownies.
Tasty.
Drugs.
Mm, duh. I have a
So-
mixed reaction.
I know.
Confusion. I don't know. Drugs definition. What is a real drug? I think that's kind of where I am.
Medicine.
Mm, beneficial.
Stories.
Important.
Hmm. Schaefer report.
Insightful.
Nixon.
Complicated.
Okay. Paper.
White.
Okay. Okay.
I
That's
think I'm
good.
looking at like a piece of paper.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Oil.
Uh, greasy.
Okay. Caregiver.
Mm, proud.
Canna Mom.
Exceptional.
The last two is Joyce.
Mm, me.
Okay. And the last one is back to basics.
Simple.
Simple. Thank you so much for playing the rapid fire round for season three. I hope you liked it. I mean, it's something that we just came up with, and people are really enjoying the process of this.
I'm like, well, I do listen to on NPR. I do listen to like all the different game shows, and I always think I could play, but you get kind of nervous when people are talking to you. You can't.
Yeah, yeah. I've taken a lot of practice, Joyce.
Yeah, I'm
Thank
sure.
you. Joyce, thank you again for playing that round. It's really amazing for the thought process and the game and the game spirit that you have there. But let me ask you this, and I'm pretty sure people they ask you nonstop, right? And there are movies which talks about marijuana, cannabis, and all that smoking weed and all that fun stuff, right? And they talk about legal, illegal. The drug lords are buying this and selling this, right? What is the first thing comes out of your idea in your head that do we still need to educate people, or do you think that these movies and shows are kind of doing what they're supposed to be doing, or is it a different time frame?
I mean, educate people in terms of what cannabis really is, or I
Yeah,
guess.
what cannabis really is, or even if it is good for you, bad for you, or
I mean, again,
beneficial.
yeah. So I talk about crushing the stigma, one can of story at a time, and again, what we were told, and I can kind of back up to these women, like these women, especially the moms and what Canna moms who are using it for their children, are bucking a lot of societal norms and a lot of information that's being kind of pounded at them, yet
Mm,
in front of their eyes they see they
mm,
see their child improving with this plant that
mm,
everyone says is so dangerous.
mm,
So the power of stories is really important. So the narratives we share are important. So, if we as we bring this into the normalization is just basically seeing people who use cannabis and are fine, which is
mm,
sort of the power of the Canna moms because again, I am a pro wearing, tennis playing, a lawyer, and
mm,
I talk about cannabis all day long. And people, this isn't what people think. They think it's maybe like a dirty 20-year-old.
mm,
And the women I'm talking to are not just okay. These women are exceptional. They are healthy and they are raising families and they are building businesses and they are regular daily cannabis consumers. So
mm,
again, just seeing this and just seeing it instead of having the shame, because a lot of the canna moms, the issue was there was a lot of shame, so
mm,
they were not public about it. So nobody knew about it. And that shame compounds itself. And now these moms are open and their children know that they use cannabis for medicine. And
mm,
their kids are growing up with a totally different understanding of what this plant medicine is. And
mm.
they're the next generation. And they're not going to have any of the stigmas that we have because they lived in a different world.
So that's why you were a little confused about the word drugs when I mentioned that on the rapid fire, right? Because when you're just saying shame, that kind of equals to drugs from the other people's eyes. Is that correct?
That you're doing something dangerous. And again, I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts. My husband works for, a pharmaceutical company. I
Mm,
know the power of these pharmaceuticals. It's very important to have them, especially if you're going to have something for healing.
mm,
And one of the issues I will say about cannabis, and I talk about it for health and wellness, is that it is not consistent. And
mm,
if we really, it you can use it for many different levels, but we're really going to talk about using this for curing cancer. We're
mm,
really talking about using this for like getting people off opiates. It has to be consistent. Right? It has to be clean. It has to be like medicinal, like a pharmaceutical. So we have to start thinking about this in a different way. It's fun to smoke it. Horticulturally, it's fine. But if we're gonna really incorporate this into our systems as a drug, a medicinal drug that
mm,
is very beneficial, because
mm,
it has to be more pharmaceuticalized, which is gonna happen at some point. I-
mm,
It's an you know, it's an interesting process to watch from here. And
mm.
drugs have become drugs, but we use drugs for everything, so
Exactly.
what is
Exactly.
it doing?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, but that's the people that think that drugs as medicine, as we're calling it now, according to my rapid fire,
Mhm.
those are FDA approved. Now the question is cannabis FDA approved or not? And I think that's the perception that people have. So, what are your thoughts on that part?
I mean, so again, I am meeting people at a federal level who are doing all sorts of amazing work, and again, this is a science,
Hmm.
not a belief system.
Yeah.
So I can see people who are starting to do this at a very interesting chemical and biological level. The woman I had for this week's show, she has a company out in California. Cannabis is biological; it's a plant, but
Hmm.
they're doing chemical reactions, so you don't need the plant to create the same cannabinoids. So again, it can be used very consistently, and it's very clean.
Hmm.
I mean, because the other thing, one of the issues with cannabis and hemp plants is that it it cleans the soil, which is great. Like, they actually used it at Chernobyl. It's a thing that actually takes toxins out, which
Hmm.
also means you have to be very careful where you grow it, because if you're going to use that plant for medicine or any kind of health and wellness, it has to be clean. So if it's not
Sure.
growing in clean soil, it's tricky. So
Yeah.
this idea that you can create these similar cannabinoids through chemistry and not biology is really, that's a big step forward.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Thank you again for that. And let me ask you this one last question, if you don't mind. The last question is that the corporate worlds and the people who are selling cannabis, right? I don't think they're all saying the same story, or are they? Or people are just not understanding.
I think because it's become very retail, we've become it's become business, and it started as medicine. It's health and wellness. I talk about it as health and wellness.
Hmm,
So, but we have divided it into medicinal cannabis and adult use cannabis, which is tricky. And
hmm,
the issue about business, the dispensaries, sort of the level is that because it's not legal federally, it's very hard to get access to cash
hmm,
to create these businesses. This is a big business. I mean, this is a huge business issue. We're talking about they actually businesses, dispensaries, you can't we have an issue with 280E, part of the federal tax code. You can't deduct normal business expenses. It's not run like a normal business. So the problem is that you have a retail industry that's sort of focused on maybe a certain segment of like the population who they think are cannabis users,
hmm,
and that's sort of the market they're going towards. And for me, my mission is really to talk about it's women my age and older. We need it the most. We know it the least. You should be marketing to us. You should be talking about the health and wellness benefits because that's what we want. We don't want to get high and like sit
hmm.
on the couch and watch Scooby Doo. We want to feel good and we want to have an option. We don't want to have to use pharmaceuticals and we don't want to have to use alcohol and we don't want to just have to feel bad. And
That's
this is an option. So, I mean, that's the story we share, the women share about health and wellness, and hopefully that's the story that's getting out there.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you again, and thank you again for clearing up at least whatever the mess that we are hearing in the media and everything else. And thank you for making me understand a little when it comes to Canna Moms and all the stuff between the medicine, the drug, and all the fun and the craziness and the stressness when it comes with this.
And
So,
it is fun, and it's pretty, and it's got a lot of accessories, and it's a culture, it's a different kind of culture, and I just from my own personal experience, so my children were in college during the pandemic,
mm,
and they had been away, and this is sort of a weird transitional time for me. I was getting more involved with cannabis, and we
mm,
did not know it was gonna be essential.
mm,
So before they came home as refugees, I had run around, and I would buy all sorts of tinctures and salves and
mm.
flour, and they show up for the pandemic, and they're like, "Mom, there's no alcohol." I'm like, "Yeah, but we have pot everywhere. We're gonna be so nice to each other."
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm pretty sure the attitude and the ambiance is going to be very nice right after that. So,
But we got along, we were fine, and I would much rather be in lockdown with a stoner than a drinker. I learned that, and it changed our relationship. Again, it allows us to sit together,
mm,
and it just allows you to be. I guess that's part of the it allows you to sort of exist as opposed to,
mm,
like, when you're drunk, I
mm.
don't know, this is, like, a lot more energy. It's a different energy, so
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was really good for us. And it made us talk to each other. It was an interesting time to be all together and learning to consume cannabis together.
Wow, wow. Thank you so much, Joyce, for being here. But before you leave, do you have any last words to all my Back to Basics listeners and viewers? And how was your journey on Back to Basics too? On top of that.
Well, this is great. Thank you for talking to me today. I do enjoy sharing these stories. And an advice, again, this is a plant that is out there that can be used for health and wellness. If you're having issues that you don't seem to be able to solve with other things, it's an opportunity for you to try something different. And if you're looking for information about products or nursings or there's so many people in this industry, you should check out the Canna Mom Show. We've interviewed over 150 women from across the country and around the world. And these are just really good resources because every single woman I've talked to, every single one, their main focus is always education.
Wow, Joyce, thank you again for being here on the show. Very, very glad that you came here. I had a greatest time in the world, and
Thank you.
hopefully, if I have any more questions, I'm definitely going to be knocking on your door, because I think education is one of those things that we just need to learn over and over again. And I'm learning more about you and understanding about Canna Mom, and I think I'm going to listen to it if that's okay with you, because I think we all just need to be more educated when it comes to this. So thank you again for that.
Thank you for, again, being open. It's hard to change hearts and minds. It's very hard to, we believe certain things and we believe them for whatever reason. This is a hard one to shift. But the health and wellness, if you try it and you feel better, it opens up that crack in your mind that maybe it's something I didn't know.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah.
Joyce, thank you again for being here.
Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Guys, so we spoke with Joyce today and we talked about Canna Mom, didn't we? And we talked about the good things and the bad things. Well, there's no good things and bad things. There's always good things according to the episode. But you have to make that decision that if it is a good thing or a bad thing. Because remember, we're only giving you facts of what we know and what we read and what we went through. We don't know if it is good or bad. That's up to you to decide. Now, as usual, as always, there's a quote of the day from Back to Basics, and hopefully Joyce will like this quote. The quote is, "The biggest killer on planet is stress." And I think the best medicine is and always has been cannabis. Now, that's what Willie Nelson says. But the question is that what you say? Now, that's the question. Now, as usual, as always, what do we always say at the end of the sentence or end of the episode? Everything in life goes back to basics, and that's what we did today, guys. Guys, take care. God bless, and I will see you next time on Back to Basics.
I talk about this all day long. I forget that people don't talk about this all the time. So, if you really have questions or concerns or anything you're interested in, I'm a little podcaster out here in Massachusetts, but this is really, this is something new. This is something different that can really make you feel better.
Yeah, for sure. Guys, thank you again for tuning in to Back to Basics and listening to the excellent episode that we had today with our guest. With your love and support, we do need you to at least rate our show, review our show, because it does make us stronger day by day, week by week, as I usually say on my episodes. And there are 3 things in this episode that it makes a hit for me, which is the content, the guest, and definitely the host. So guys, take care, God bless, and remember, everything in life goes back to basics, and that's what we did today, guys. Guys, take care, God bless, and see you next time on Back to Basics.